of the team. So let's talk about Iowa. We've been bringing them up a few times here. This is one I wanted to discuss a little bit because I think it's a interesting matchup, and I really wanted to get your thoughts on it too, because this is a Kent State team that's going to be heading to Iowa City that I actually like a lot in the MAC. It's funny, their win total was only 6.5, but they were one of the favorites to compete for that MAC championship, and it's just because their their non-conference schedule is so tough. They played Texas A&M. Who did they have week 1? I'm spacing that.
They had A&M week 1. Last week they had VMI.
Oh, VMI, that's right. Yeah, and they obviously dominated that team. I think are they D2 now? Or are they 1AA?
VMI is FCS, yeah.
Oh, they are FCS.
They're in the Southern Conference.
Yeah, and they won. I think they won 65 to something. Wasn't a game.
Right.
Of course, they were outmatched. But this Iowa team looked really good last week, defensively, offensively. They got the job done. They won the game. They're favored by 22.5 in this one. Totals at 56, which I'm actually surprised because it opened up at 55 and it's going up a little bit. What are your thoughts on this one with the line move and the spread?
All right. Well, I will say that of the 3 games we're going to talk about here, this is the most situational play. If we just throw the fundamentals, which we won't do, but if you were to just push those aside and say what Iowa's been through in the first 2 weeks are a huge Big Ten conference game against Indiana, who everybody adored preseason. Yep. And then they come right back with in-state rival Iowa State inside the top 10, who, again, most preseason publications adored the Iowa State side, and they've beaten them both. And you wonder if this isn't a game where they just breathe, sigh, gasp, come up for air a little bit against Kent State after playing those two, which they were hugely emotional games. If Iowa State, this is why it becomes situational, because if Iowa State, if Iowa comes to play 100% focused, then you're likely to see, because they're so much like Texas A&M. I mean, Kirk Ferentz, Jimbo Fisher, run the football, play. The similarities are endless between those two. And Texas A&M destroyed this team 45-10. Kent, for all their pace and for all their offense, could only gain 338 total yards, and they got beat 45-10.
Crum had what, like 70 yards passing?
Yeah, they had 110 total passing.
Yeah.
And if Iowa comes, their defense is every bit as good as A&M's. So that could be the answer. The other, let me speak closer to the total here for a second, Ben, because what we hear after 2 weeks is, Iowa's got this tremendous defense, but man, they still stink on offense. And now they're the same exact philosophy on offense. Right? Yeah. They're very pedestrian, methodical. We're not going to take too many chances. But again, they played Tom Allen's Indiana defense. They played Iowa State Cyclones defense, which is very, very good under Matt Campbell. And now they're going to get Kent's MAC defense, which just isn't real good. Mm-hmm. So if their point production is going to go up mid-30s, high 30s, it's going to be this week, which is probably why the total has been bumped up a little bit. Because if Iowa gets to 38, then in any letdown situation, if Kent were to get to 20, and Kent's more than capable of getting 20 if Iowa doesn't play 60 minutes worth of defense here, then that's, you're over the total right there. Yeah. Boom. So I think that's why it might have gone up a little bit. I wouldn't play Iowa here in this situation just because I do feel like this is I don't want to call it letdown, but I do want to say the importance placed on those first 2 games and to get through them was huge for Iowa. This one is not the same. So maybe total over.
I agree with you because next week they have Colorado State, but it's just coming off 2 emotional games.
Yeah.
Because let's say they win this one by 17 and it was closer than they wanted. They're going to be mentally focused for Colorado State, and they're going to be probably either way because Colorado State is an absolute dumpster fire right now. But I like what you're saying, though, because, you could come off to a little bit of a slow start here against a Kent State team. I could definitely see that. So Iowa, 2.9 yards per play last week against Iowa State and only 173 yards Those interceptions were huge by Purdy. And, ultimately, I think that's kind of what controlled the game for them. But in this one, I actually jumped on the 55 and a half.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised it moved. But I can see why. But I mean, I wouldn't have bet it at 55 and a half if I thought it was going to go up to 56. It was one of those numbers that I had enough confidence in, but it does hurt to not get the closing line value. And that's not to say that it can't come back. Because I think as the weather forecast matures, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some wind in this one. It's September, October. I mean, that's very Iowa weather. I'm showing like 12 to 15 mile per hour winds, but things can change and never just play a total strictly off the weather. That can be a little dangerous. But yeah, I like the number at 55 and a half. It did get the 56. I think the biggest thing is you alluded to Texas A&M and Iowa have very similar physical styles of defense. And I think there's a lot of similarities on how the game may go. And I think people see that 70 spot that Kent State just put up, but it's just night and day the type of defense that VMI is going to show versus Kent State. So, but it does worry me because Kent State's a team, if they're down big, like, they can move the ball because Dustin Crum, that's what he does, right? And I think he went pretty deep into the fourth quarter, I believe, against Texas A&M. I would have to double check that. I know they brought in another guy, but I guess they're probably not going to pull him by the fourth quarter, I would guess, unless it's like maybe if it's like a 40-0 type game. But yeah, it just was a tad alarming to see that 56 pop up, but I still feel confident. And who knows, this could still end and close at a 54. So it's just interesting. It's an interesting move.
I would say this for people that are looking to bet the side. For me, it would be Kent State or not at all.
Yeah.
And I'll add one more reason in why I bet, because they've already seen this. They saw Texas A&M. They didn't perform well against it, but they saw it.
Yeah,
and adjustments can be
got
made.
That punch in the mouth, right? And they're like, all
yeah,
right.
And now it's the second time in 3 weeks they're going to see it, and maybe there's some adjustments made. And I'll also say that Iowa hasn't really played a tempo team yet. Indiana and Iowa State don't rush it to the line every 12, 13 seconds the way Kent does. And if we're talking about a potential, just slow start by Iowa or whatnot, why not the defensive line getting worn down? Why, Iowa can obviously control the football and keep their defense on the sidelines. That can happen too.
Yeah.
But I think there's way more reasons why you would take the 22.5 with Kent, including backdoor in the fourth quarter, because they're never done scoring, so to speak. They're never, you never, in the last possession, you're not thinking, oh my God, there's no way they're going to score. They can always score.
Oh, yeah.
So 22.5 seems like a lot. It gets a very, very conservative team that's played two very huge emotional games right off the bat.
And Kent State has to be up there in pace of play, right? I mean, they have to.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah, they're one of the top 10.
That's how they played last year. That's how they play with Dustin Crum. So they're going to have opportunities to score from the standpoint of getting multiple possessions. Is just, does it come down to, can they move the ball against Iowa? But they're going to take some shots.
Right.
They'll try to get it going. So yeah, interesting to see where this closes at. But 100%, I think the pace kind of factors into this one. And yeah, we'll see if Iowa continues their deep. I mean, they made Purdy look like a JV player out there, man. I mean, that there's like reports coming out. They're like, is Purdy going to be benched? Like, imagine a year ago us saying that, right? Like, he was like the next big thing. So
yeah, and let's give him credit, because that's 2 in a row. Michael Penix Jr. for Indiana is a tremendous quarterback, and they picked him off and ran 2 back for touchdowns as well. So it's no fluke what Iowa's doing pass defense-wise. They're tough. And they made 2 really, really good nationally known quarterbacks look very, very average in 2 weeks. And they didn't need a whole lot of offense to win that game by 10 points, by double digits. As you mentioned the numbers, right? Not even 200 total yards, I don't think, in that game for Iowa.
Yeah, somewhat, I don't want to say it's misleading, but they did dominate, but it wasn't so much offensively. I'll
Right.
put it that way. And I had the under in that, and that was, oh man, that was a close one just because I think there were a few interceptions in the red zone. I was like, oh man, yeah, that was a little bit of a sweat to start the day. So I'm glad that one came through. All right, we got a few more minutes before you leave. I know you have plenty of other games you're going to be discussing throughout the week on some different shows and such, but is there any game that kind of